TL, doctor, narrowly avoided being sent to prison for 10 to 20 years for several drug crimes, and instead paid minimum fines due to some quick thinking and taking a huge risk. Late to the party, but when I was in high school and the few years after, my primary source of income was selling pot. One day I was just hanging out at home with the GF. We went to the Circle K a few houses down and got some beer. The clerk, who I knew pretty well at this point, asked if he knew where I could get a dub sack. I said sure, and that I'd be back soon. I go home and forget about it. An hour or two later I'm like, oh shit, remember, weigh it out and go back. He had already given me the money, very important detail for later, so I waited until he had no customers. He came out and we went around the icebox, just smoking and chatting. I handed him the bag. Now, there was no one around. Empty lot except for this beat up Volvo facing the record store next door. If I had been paying better attention, I may have noticed this Volvo had completely tinted windows, which seemed odd to do on a beat up Volvo. Two men get out of the car and approach us. One tall skinny guy wearing 100% denim and another guy who looks like Dog the Bounty Hunter in a beige sweater. They approach us and ask how we are doing. Me and Clark look at each other like, you know these guys? Then all of a sudden, the flash badges and yell PD. You're under arrest. And cuff us, separate us, and search us. Beige Dog goes through my texts, finds a couple dubious ones, a few crumpled up 20s, starts trying to get me to admit to doing a lot of business today blah blah. Then they surprise me by walking me and my GF back to my porch, saying they've seen me come and go quite a bit and just want to make sure you don't have a pound of heroin in there, and they'll just charge me with a misdemeanor. Otherwise, it will be jail and a felony. So here we are, on my front porch, me saying there's no way I will let them in my house and to call my lawyer over and over. At one point, my roommate walks out, says hi, gets in his car and leaves. At this point, Dog explains that if I don't let him search the house, he's going to park a few squad cars on the lawn, extract everyone from the house, and wait on a warrant, and they will charge everyone in the house with every little thing they find in any room. I now know this is not legal. Then, I was just scared. My roommate that had just left was a total nerd with a great job. Straight edge. Rarely drank and never smoked or anything at all. I was terrified of him losing his job. Unfortunately for me, I had just had an opportunity to get a crop of mushrooms at a steal of a deal. My area was super dried up on mushrooms at the time, so I asked around and basically had all my deals set before I got it. This timing was perfect, because just 30 feet away on the coffee table of my bedroom was 1/4 of a pound of mushrooms, neatly weighted out into ounces and 1/8. Top that with all the pot in there, it wasn't looking pretty. So, I proposed that I'll let one of them in, to search just my bedroom, and be done with it. I knew once I let them in they could do whatever, but I was out of options. Beige Dog agrees. Canadian Tux stays with my GF, who looks terrified like WTF are you doing at me, and Dog the Sweater Hunter enters with me. I lead him upstairs and walk right past my door, which thank God was closed, and into the straight edge guy's room. Dog completely turns it over, takes out drawers, turns the mattress over, the whole shebang. As he does this, I quietly turn off the computer monitor with a background of my roommate and his GF glaring on it. Guy finds nothing, sticks with his agreement and walks me and my shit-eating grin back downstairs. My GF, probably assuming I'm going to prison for many years, is looking like she's about to die, but I'm just grinning. Guy still fucking charged me with a felony. Then they leave. Long story short, paid a lot for a great atty who was friends with the prosecutor. Since no money was seen to be exchanged, the charge was knocked down to deliverance of marijuana. The prosecutor recommended the minimum sentence. I paid an $121 fine, did 80 hours of community center at a local music venue, saw a ton of shows for free, and retired from selling. God, I hope someone reads this. 3 to 4 years ago, I was living in this bigger European city, 2 mil people, for some years now. I went with a girl to a pub, and since all tables were full, we sat at the bar. There was an older guy sitting next to me, 50-ish, white hair, smoking a cigar, who kind distracted me because he reminded me of my uncle. Now mind, my uncle was living in the US for around 25 years already. He didn't look like that dude, nor did he act too similar. That bar guy just had some gestures that reminded me of him, mixed with the look of another distant relative. So, the girl I was with goes to the toilet, so I can't hold back anymore and look this dude in the eyes and tell him he reminds me of my uncle. He jokingly asks, "What's his name?" I tell him, and also tell him he lives in the US and works in field_of_work, and then the guy looks stunned and tells me the names of my whole fucking family. Turns out he was the flatmate of my uncle 30 years ago for about half a year. That was definitely one of the weirdest bar stories I experienced. TLDR, went to bar in big city, guy reminds me of my uncle. I tell him. Turns out he was my uncle's flatmate 30 years ago for half a year. Uncle lives on another continent for 25 years now. Was served lunch sometime during a flight. While eating, noticed that the woman next to me is slowing down in her movements, slower cutting, slower chewing, etc. Suddenly she stops completely in her movements, fork and knife in hands, half cut food on her plate, face bowed forward above her plate and nothing else. Touched her on the shoulder, pushed a little bit, asked her if everything was okay, no reaction. Couldn't really tell if she was still alive. Was it the air conditioning or her breath? No idea. Didn't want to panic and frighten everyone else. You know. Dead person. Made eye contact with a stewardess, point towards next to me. Couple minutes later, 5 stewardesses including co-pilot form a barrier around our seats, and like in a movie tried to get a reaction accident on me. Woman wakes up, looks up and says just this one sentence, "I took really strong sleeping pills," and goes back to sleep in the same Tyrannosaurus posture. As if this has happened before, and she had anticipated this conversation, as if she knew that her mind would only be awakened long enough for one sentence. So for the entire remaining 6 to 7 hour flight, there is this lady next to me, mimicking a Tyrannosaurus, her hands still grabbing the now removed fork and knife, drooling on the table, and everyone passing by giving me this questioning look. Best flight ever. I saved a man's life, and I never saw him again 10 years later. This is still the craziest thing that has ever happened to me. In high school, I worked as a lifeguard at a country club for a few summers to earn some money. It was a cushy gig. It was for country club members only, so a large part of the job was learning people's names and interacting with them. Mostly just saying good morning Mr. Gerety, and listening to some generic mumbling about millennials. Well, over the 4th of July weekend, there were more people at the pool than usual. Each member could sign in one guest, and there was a middle-aged man jumping off the diving boards who I hadn't seen before. He was over 6 feet, at least 230 pounds, and was doing gainers off the low dive into the pool to make big splashes to impress his country club member friends. Well, one particular jump he got a running start and slipped off the board at the very end. His momentum was already leaning backwards to do the jump and his body came off the board a few feet and his head rotated backwards and smacked right into the diving board. I can still hear that cracking sound in my mind. I'm sitting 8 feet off the ground in the lifeguard chair at the diving well watching this all go down, and I'm praying that I don't have to do anything, even though I knew shit was about to go down. I didn't see any blood, which was a good sign. But as I watched his body sink down I counted 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000. No movement. Fuck. I blew 3 short tweets on the whistle, the cadence to signal to the other guards that I would need the neck board, and jumped in with my boy making as little of an impact as possible in the water. My lifeguard training took over as I dove down 8 to 9 feet to grab this dude. He was out, just making no movement whatsoever. Like I said, he was a big dude, but he wasn't as heavy in the water as I grabbed him and kicked us both up to the surface. I hoisted him onto the buoy and swam over to the edge, where by now the other guards had stuck the board down into the water. I lined up his limp body with the board as we all worked together to strap him into the board. The other guards pivoted the boards out of the water while I climbed out. I took a half-second look around to a half-dozen shocked faces, and it became clear to me that this was my show. Great. Still obeying my adrenaline-fueled rote memory of my training, I shouted for someone to call an ambulance as I made a decision See, I thought he probably had a neck injury. The board he was strapped into is designed to not move his head, so he doesn't further injure his neck or back. But he wasn't visibly breathing, so I had to save his life at whatever cost it took. Or at least that's what my 16-year-old brain decided. So I started chest compressions. What they don't tell you about chest compressions is that you are breaking shit. You can feel bones and cartilage cracking under your palms. It feels horrible. I still haven't been able to shake that feeling. One round of 30, and then I did 2 breaths into his mouth. His head was already titled back a bit from being in the board, so I didn't have to move his neck. After 2 breaths, I went back to chest compressions, and after 5 or 6 a little water leaked out of his mouth. He coughed a few times, and the other guards picked up the board and whisked him away so fast I didn't even know what happened. I rolled over onto the concrete, a tinnitus-like ringing in my head, my heart racing, just sitting there taking it in. I went into some trance as my teenage body struggled to deal with what just happened. Start to finish it probably only took about 6 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime of stress and nausea had built up in my body. I was walked over to the guard shack, dried off, and walked up to the country club's nicer member buildings. The manager, who was a friend's dad and had gotten me the job, sat down with me as we talked about what happened. I gave him the basic details, signed some documents, and was sent home for the day. Like I said, I was in some kind of trance and was just operating on autopilot. I'm not sure how much sense I was making at the time, and it took me several hours to process what just happened. I came back for my shift a few days later, and I was told by another lifeguard that the guy was okay. I was thanked profusely by the member who brought him as a guest, but I never saw that guy again. This was still the craziest thing that has ever happened. I'm glad my instincts took over, and I remembered my training. I might not have done everything exactly right, but I tried my best, and at the end of the day he lived through it. I hope that guy's doing okay. This is one long ass story, but the coincidence is astounding. I'm from a tiny province in the Philippines who decided to work in Manila right after college way back 2007. I got into a call center and met a lot of friends. Stayed in the company for about 2 years. Graveyard shift wasn't for me. Fast forward to 2013. My widowed mom in the province met through a mutual friend, a French guy, and they both got interested with each other. They eventually got engaged in 2014 and married soon after, 90df France, so they could move back to France. As they were planning their trip, I posted on social media about possible Filipino connections in France to help my mom transition well. A former colleague of mine in that call center in Manila many years back sent me a message. Told me that she has this Filipina friend, let's call her Alina, who has been living in France for 20 plus years now, and that she may be able to help my mom. So, I told my mom to add Rowena on Facebook and connect with her. They got into talking. One day my mom was Skyping with her. They were talking about their husbands when my mom pulled out and showed to her a vintage photo of their husband when he was in university. An old photo of him sitting on a couch with his then best friend whom he has not seen since graduating. Career opportunities abroad and no cell phones during that time led to them growing apart. As soon as Rowena saw the photo, she gasped. "That's my husband beside your husband," she said. She then hurriedly went to her office and took out the exact same photo which her husband has kept through the years as well. After a few shocks and tears, 2 long lost best friends were able to catch up after nearly 40 years. TL. Doctor, by amazing coincidence, 2 best friends found each other through their wives. For context, I'm a 19-year-old Scottish guy who was interrailing around Europe for a month. We were in Budapest for a few days hitting up the clubs and sparties, really enjoying ourselves. Eventually it comes time to leave, and we decide to get an early morning train to Split, around 5 AM. Anyways, we have 2 taxis booked to the train station and we stumble out still kind of half asleep, and start loading our stuff into the taxis. As we are loading we see 3 young guys sprinting full speed ahead up the road shouting "fucking run." We laughed, thought they were just having drunk fun. No, they were not. As we get in the taxis, this guy covered head to toe in tattoos and others blood comes to my door and asks to shake my hand. Not wanting to offend this crazy looking fucker, I shake his bloodied hand, and he wishes me well. Phew, got off lightly. Guy tries to do the same with our big fuck off Bulgarian taxi driver. He refuses. Bulgarian taxi driver gets in taxi and starts to back out. Crazy fuck is not happy with this and starts to go to town on this guy's taxi with elbows, fists, knees, etc. We start to drive away thinking there's no chance he's gonna be bothered to follow a taxi going 20 miles per hour. Right? Now this fuck is fucking Superman. Sprints faster than humanly possible after a taxi with this mad look in his eye. Taxi driver goes to turn a corner, thinking we'd got away from him, but as we turn there's a bin lorry blocking the entire road. Crazy fuck rounds this corner like an atom out the fucking Hadron Collider. At this point I'm shouting half asleep Scottish at our taxi driver lock a fucking doors, which he thankfully does. Crazy fuck starts battering the windows in with fists, blood smeared everywhere, knuckles burst, rips off the wing mirrors, starts smashing the windows in with them. At this point our friends in the taxi behind us are buckled in laughter as we sit in pure terror as the fucking Grim Reaper looms ready to take our souls. Both taxi drivers get out to get him to fuck off, spits in both their faces and throws the wing mirror at them, then books it out of there. Maddest thing about it is as he was leaving he very nicely apologizes to one of the locals watching this in awe. TLDR. Don't refuse handshakes from men covered in blood, it's rude. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more daily 9 PM Reddit uploads.